On one frigid Minnesota night, Justin Turner had no inkling that he would find himself in pursuit of his runaway dog while contemplating the need to dial 911. Justin and his family resided in a quaint, tranquil Minnesota town where tight-knit relationships were the norm. Their neighbors were not just acquaintances. They were close-knit, familiar faces who had a good grasp of each other's family dynamics. This circle included their beloved fur baby Midnight. While Midnight was inherently gentle and not particularly suited to guarding, the safety and harmony of the Turners' neighborhood rendered this a minor concern. Their locality boasted excellent schools, convenient proximity to Justin and his wife's workplaces, and generally agreeable weather, except when winter's chill descended. Minnesota winters were known for their relentless severity. Though the locals had adapted to the challenges posed by snow, Mother Nature occasionally threw them curveballs in the form of polar vortexes and snowstorms. When these weather crises loomed, everyone remained on high alert, especially in the face of sub-zero temperatures. During these trying times, staying indoors became a common practice. The Turners had decided to bring Midnight into their lives, partially as a response to their circumstances. Following the birth of their first child, there had been a considerable gap before the arrival of their second. This meant that on those bitterly cold days when everyone was confined indoors, their son often felt a deep sense of loneliness without friends to play with or the freedom to run outside. The Turners wrestled with this challenge until they arrived at a solution that seemed tailor-made for their situation. A large, fluffy canine companion for their son to frolic with while they were all cooped up inside. This is where Midnight entered the picture. He effortlessly filled the void their son had experienced, swiftly becoming the favorite fluffy playmate for the entire family. Little did they realize the far-reaching impact this furry addition would have on their lives just a few years down the road. At this point, the Turner had already had Midnight for just over 4 years. They were currently experiencing one of the coldest winters to date and were grateful for their pooch's companionship. It was a Sunday afternoon when an emergency alert came onto the television, warning everyone that a polar vortex was due to hit them that evening. This would result in temperatures and conditions Justin had yet to see in his own lifetime. Of course, everyone was immediately on edge. They frantically checked all the windows, the furnace, and even their food supplies in case they were snowed in for a few days. Justin ensured that they had diesel for their generator in case the power cut. He then went next door to check on his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Davis. Mrs. Davis, or Maureen, was a whopping 87 years old and lived on her own in a big, empty house. Justin always popped in at times like this to ensure that she was all set and had everything she needed. He would always offer to come and stay with her, but unfortunately she wouldn't. She was more comfortable in her home at times like these, she always said. When he went to Maureen this time around, she seemed in good spirits. She promised him that she had everything she might need and assured him she would be just fine. Justin took his leave as quickly as he could to get back into the warmth of his home. He was excited to unwind, relax, and simply watch a movie. When he walked through the door, however, he saw a grim look on his wife's face. She had the news on, and it wasn't good at all. The news reports cited that there had already been over 20 fatalities caused by the extreme cold, and that major services were down all across the northern part of the country. This was going to be worse than expected. Justin reassured his family that they had everything they needed, and that they would just have to bunker down and stay as warm as possible. He also warned his children not to go outside under any circumstances. At the expected incoming temperatures, they could get hurt or sick very quickly without much effort. As the afternoon turned into evening, the weather progressively got worse and worse. It wasn't too bad looking out from the warmth of an insulated home, and Justin just thanked all his lucky stars that his family was safe and together during a time like this. Midnight hardly seemed concerned at all. The shiny black pooch simply ran around with the kids until he felt sleepy. It was just after dinner, though, when Midnight's demeanor changed completely. The family had just enjoyed a hot meal together and were settling down to watch television when Midnight suddenly got up and went to the living room window. This particular window overlooked the driveway between Justin and Maureen's homes. This may have seemed normal to others, but the Turner knew right away that something wasn't right. Midnight was not a guard dog, nor was he a very alert dog, but what Justin was seeing before him was clearly a dog on alert. His ears were perked up, and he was staring intently out the window, whining. After a good 10 minutes, the whine turned into a bark. This was Justin's cue to take Midnight outside. He knew that if he didn't, Midnight would just continue to bark. Justin just couldn't fathom why this dog would want to go outside, especially in this weather. He tried to distract Midnight because he didn't really want to leave the comfort of his warm home, but it was no use. The dog was highly determined. There was definitely something out there. So, Justin grabbed the trash, thinking that if he was going to go outside, he might as well complete an annoying chore. As he stepped out into the freezing cold, he knew he'd have to get back inside as soon as possible. The skin on his face immediately began to burn from the cold. However, Midnight just ran off. At first, Justin didn't worry too much. He thought Midnight was playing a game and was sure the dog would come running back soon enough. Unfortunately, he didn't. Justin started to panic after 2 minutes. He began to trace Midnight's paw prints in the snow to see where he had gone. They led him into Mrs. Davis's garden and around the back. As he turned the corner, he was met with a sight that made his stomach turn. In front of him was Midnight, wagging his tail anxiously. The dog was standing over the collapsed body of Mrs. Davis. Justin ran as quickly as he could to her and found that she was still breathing, but could barely talk. The skin on her face was blunted red, turning purple, and she looked so scared. Midnight just kept barking at Justin, obviously anxious at what was in front of him. Mrs. Davis was one of his favorite humans in the neighborhood. Justin quickly began to try to lift his frail neighbor from the ground, trying not to hurt her in any way. He managed to get one of her arms over his shoulder and helped her walk to his house. Justin screamed frantically for his wife, and when she came to the window, he told her to call 911. It took him almost 5 minutes to get her into his house, and once she was sitting in front of the fireplace, the whole family immediately began to warm her up with heavy blankets. Thankfully, the roads weren't too snowed out yet, and the ambulances were able to get to their home. They provided Mrs. Davis with some assistance and eventually got her to talk. She explained to them that she had left her home to refill one of her bird feeders when she slipped on some ice, resulting in a hard fall that rendered her unconscious. When she regained consciousness, she was severely chilled and weakened, making it nearly impossible to move, leaving her stranded in the frigid outdoors. After some discussion, they determined that she had been outside for nearly 20 minutes. The paramedic conveyed to Justin that without his timely intervention, she would likely have succumbed to the harsh conditions. However, Justin understood that the true hero in this situation was Midnight. Had Midnight not run away, they might never have discovered that Mrs. Davis was in distress and needed assistance. The paramedics rushed Mrs. Davis to the hospital for treatment of her injuries, and Midnight was rewarded with some delectable treats. Justin felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for having placed his trust in his loyal canine companion. After all, Midnight had unequivocally demonstrated that he was truly man's best friend. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section.